Welcome once again to Mid-State Money Talk. Today on the desk, we've got Kevin Dietrich, Joe Dietrich. I'm your host, Spike Spangle, and apparently you guys got rid of Al. You got rid of Dad for today's program.
Temporarily.
Temporarily.
Yeah.
He's at the office taking care of things.
He's always hanging around somewhere.
Well, good to have the brother Dietrichs on the desk today. I'll start with you, Joe. What's on your mind? What do you want to talk about?
Yeah, so today we want to talk about risk, the various risks that we're going to deal with in retirement. Emotional changes that we go through, preparing for and getting into that area. So those are two big
Fantastic.
topics.
What's on your mind? What do you
Estate planning is on my mind.
Estate planning.
Let's
We
talk about that
haven't talked about that. Yeah. And something that Al wanted to talk about for sure for all of our viewers out there is realizing when you're in the retirement red zone. And what exactly does the retirement red zone mean? It's usually a few years out from retirement, maybe even those first 2 or 3 years in retirement, making sure that you've got somebody helping you out with that. That, in fact, we start with the risks. And I think a lot of folks don't even realize when they're in that retirement red zone.
Yeah, absolutely. So the retirement red zone, 5 years before, 5 years after. When we talk about risk, we think about risk as far as market risk, right? Because the market's going up and down, where we're invested. But there's lots of risks that we deal with in retirement. We deal with longevity. When are we going to pass away? You know, we always say, well, our crystal ball broke, but you know, we have ways to start at least planning for that and working through that. Mortality, we've got inflationary risk. There's lots of things going on, but the big one that most people think about is that market risk, that money going up or down. You know, where are we invested? And that red zone is really, really important. I mean, you know, taking a loss during that red zone is probably one of the biggest indicators of success or failure.
Yeah, liquidity. Taxes, that's all part of those risks in retirement.
Yeah.
Do you understand that the biggest risk in retirement, the biggest outpouring of money in your retirement is probably going to be taxes?
You know, I've always wanted to know that question because considering what you're going to spend in food, what you're probably going to have to spend in healthcare, it's not like we're getting healthier as we go into our retirement years. But I keep hearing that from folks like yourselves, taxes being one of the big things that we're going to spend money on in retirement. We're going to cover that a little bit further.
Sure.
I want to stay on this, though. The risk that we're taking in our portfolios, I don't think a lot of folks realize how much risk they're taking. It's not their fault. We go back, again, to that do-it-yourself. We've been told to do it ourselves in our 401ks for a long time. When folks come in, do they realize how much risk they're taking?
No, typically not. We see it all the time. So best example is a story. So, you know, Maggie's come in, and Maggie, we didn't get to meet Maggie early on. You know, she was already in retirement. And so this is kind of what we see. So Maggie's 71. She's got about $600,000 sitting in an IRA that she had rolled over. But we're a little out of balance. We start working with Maggie. We find out what her risk tolerance is, her age. She's at the point where we're going to start taking distributions. We're almost past the red zone. And here, she's at a very aggressive position in almost all equities. And she's a very moderate or moderately conservative type of investor. And here we are, case in point, you know, 2022, Maggie lost over $100,000 in the market during that red zone. That is a bad time to be taking a loss like that.
Yeah, you said close to distribution. She was how old again?
71.
71. So she's 71 years old. How did she not realize how much risk she was in? Was she self-choosing all of these funds? Were these from her 401k? How did she get there?
Yeah, so you know, you roll them over to the 401k, and we do a little DIYer. We ask our neighbor, we ask our family, you know, and I think, you know, that's kind of a combination of what happened, but it could just been what she rolled it over with, what she was accustomed to, what she heard on the internet. You know, there's a whole lot of sources of information. Most of those sources of information aren't fitting in with your overall retirement plan and focused on your success. Yeah. So that's why it's important when we meet with people, we come in and we're doing a complete review. And this income plan, this investment plan, all of these pieces fit together. I always say nothing happens in a vacuum.
Right. Yeah. Fellas, there are two sides to a risk coin, though. There's taking way too much risk. I think we see that a lot. Sure. A lot of folks didn't realize they're choosing funds in their 401k and they just let it ride. And all of a sudden they are 65, 66. The market takes a drop, and all of a sudden you're pushing out your retirement years. Kevin, do you ever, though, sometimes see the opposite side of that coin? Taking so little risk that we're never going to have enough growth, or we're not going to have stuff to be able to help us keep up with inflation.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I had a gentleman come in that retired in 2019, and he's in a 2030 target fund. okay, in his 401k he's currently in. And so he's actually in more bonds in that particular target fund than equities. And he retired 4 years ago, 5 years ago. And so he wasn't taking enough risk, he was actually more conservative than he should have been.
Yeah, Kevin, you just kicked open a door and you didn't realize this. This is a Pandora's box door for me. That target date fund.
Oh, yes.
So let's talk a little bit about the funds, okay? So normally we have stock funds, we've got bond funds, and in reaction to 2008, these target date funds were created. It was supposed to lessen risk. But it sounds like a lot of folks are misusing them or just misunderstanding them. A 2030 fund?
They don't know what they don't know. So it goes back to when the 401k was created. We're supposed to become experts as employees, right? And so I think they realized that these big box stores, if you want to call them that, so they started these target date funds. And so what essentially is happening is, let's say we're in a 2030 target date fund. That means you're going to retire in 2030. The closer you get to that date, the less volatility or less risky your account is. So you might be in 2010 starting this fund, so you have 20 years to retire. So you might be 8% equities, 20% bonds. As you get closer to the 2030 fund, you're going to be more bonds than equities. Isn't that right, Joe?
Absolutely. And you're saying, well, you're going to retire in 2030. Well, that means that everybody that's going to retire in 2030, you all have the same exact investments. But guess what? You're probably not the same exact investor, or you don't have the same exact expenses. You might be married, not married. Lifestyle is completely different, but you have the same exact investment of everybody else that retires in your same year. That's a little bit cookie cutter, as we say, right?
Way too cookie cutter.
And risk tolerance. You don't have the same risk tolerance.
Exactly.
And so, someone might have a risk tolerance of like 80. If it's 1 to 100, 0 to 100 is risk tolerance. 100 is the most risky you can be. They might have 80. Another investor might have a 40. Okay.
Yep.
So those target date funds don't really take that into consideration. So working with a financial advisor, doing those risk tolerance questionnaires, and finding out what that sweet spot is, not for Social Security, but for investing, is really, really key.
Even if everybody, let's just say everybody on your workroom floor is 50 years old. Every single one, though, could have had a different starting times of working, different savings, like you said. Maybe their spouse works, maybe their spouse doesn't. Maybe one of them has 3 kids, maybe one of them has 1 child.
Yep.
It's all completely different.
That's right. Like you said, savings. So somebody might be maxing out their contributions and somebody's doing the bare minimum to get, say, a company match. Mm-hmm. Well, those two are not going to have the same amount of investments when they reach their retirement age. How can you guarantee that one is going to be successful and one is not? So unless you sit down with us or somebody like us, you're really not going to be able to see how all of that fits into the same type of plan that's going to be successful for
All
you.
right, Joe, Kevin, don't go anywhere. We're going to continue to talk about some of the risks here in retirement. But I want to let you know, if you're watching the program for one of the first times, you can call the phone number down on the bottom of the screen, and we will do a complete portfolio review for you. If you are in that retirement red zone, a few years out from retirement, maybe it is the year that you want to retire, or even a couple of years into retirement. If you don't know if your money is going to last, why don't you find out for sure? Call the phone number down on the bottom of the screen. In fact, do that right now. Don't go anywhere, because we have put together a message here. We've got a bio here on Kevin. I think it's going to be fair. We should also do our bio on Joe a little bit later in the program. But if you'd like to learn more about what it's like to work with First Choice Financial Services, here's a little bit about Kevin himself.
I was in Colorado, actually, pastoring a church. I just felt a disconnect or a lack of peace at the church there, and so I was praying, asking the Lord for direction. So I just felt like He had given me a burden for my dad. He was working 60, 70, 80 hours a week at his age, and I just felt burdened for that, and I wanted to, help him out. So I, approached him about it one week where they were visiting over Thanksgiving, and he says, God didn't tell him that. We laughed, but we prayed about it further, both of us, and we just felt like the Lord was leading that way. So we made the arrangements and moved my family back home to Pennsylvania. And so I was helping my dad out part-time, sort of. But the more I learned the business, the more I understood what he does and what benefit I can have for clients and people's lives. And it was just a calling, like my dad says, is a calling for him, and I think it's a calling for me. The Lord prepared me for this place, in this time. So I got my license and started selling, and I was successful. I was doing well, and once I got my license, the business kept doubling. So we kept increasing our revenue, our profits, and then helping more clients in the long run.
Welcome back to Mid-State Money Talk. Today on the desk is Kevin and Joe Dietrich, both brothers here, and both retirement income specialists of First Choice Financial Services. If you're joining for the first time, you can call that phone number on the bottom of the screen when you see it come up. Let's get you started on your own complimentary portfolio review. We're talking about the retirement red zone, but Kevin, you said even before we talk about that, we got to talk about actually all of the different phases.
Yeah, there's 3 phases when it comes to investing. Okay, you have the accumulation phase, the preservation phase, and then the distribution phase. And so we know what accumulation phase is. That's your working years. Okay, and then we obviously from last segment we know what the preservation phase is, and that's the 5 years before retirement. 5 years after, that's the preservation, trying to preserve those funds. And then the distribution phase, that's when you have to start drawing those monies out, RMDs, taking those withdrawals for whatever expenses you may have, healthcare, taxes, estate planning, those types of things.
Yeah. Would you agree, though, that most of our life, a large majority of our life, is spent in that accumulation phase?
Well, absolutely.
And it's hard to change gears. It's hard to go from preservation to then, we need to start taking that out.
That's what we see all the time. Folks come in, and we actually promote that and talk about that at our workshops, is that the difference between the accumulation phase and the distribution phase is very subtle, but also can be very knee-jerk reaction type of thing. And so, but if a lot of folks come into our offices and they're approaching retirement, they're in the preservation phase. They don't even know it. Okay, yep. And they're still investing their money the way they're in the accumulation phase, or they're still making decisions, Social Security decisions, pension decisions, like they're going to have money coming in that's outside of their Social Security or pension, right? So they're in that accumulation phase. They're thinking they're still going to be investing money into their 401k. The company's getting a match. They're just not realizing that that all stops. Yep. When you retire.
We call it uncharted territory in this transition, and the way that we see our income is huge. So somebody comes in and say, hey, I want to have X amount of dollars in retirement coming in, so this is what I need. And it says, well, we need to do this a little backwards here. We need to find out what we need and what our lifestyle is, and then create that income plan. But because they're thinking, well, I've got a check coming in, I've got a 401k that's being matched, they're still in the accumulation phase mindset.
Right.
And so when that starts to shift, everything shifts. It's an uncharted territory. That can be kind of an emotionally jarring time.
Right, as you were saying up at the top of the show, the kind of emotional changes.
Yeah, we talk about that at the workshop. We talk about the difference between the accumulation phase and distribution phase right off the base, right? Just laying that foundation, and you can just see the eyes just like open up, like okay, and they sit up and like okay, I never heard such a thing. Distribution phase, accumulation phase, and so we say who has an advisor here? Maybe half the room has advisors. Are they talking about this? No, they're not. Are they talking about Social Security maximization? No, they're not. Are they talking about taxes? No, they're not. That's why we're here.
Yeah, and that means that generally speaking, they're probably working with either an accumulation advisor or they have retirement accounts. They don't have an advisor. In fact, it's somewhere around, and this is rounding off that number, like 40% of Americans at some point have spoken with a financial advisor by the time they reach 65. I don't know why it's not much higher.
Right.
I think people think that there might be a cost to it. Again, when we talk about the review, sitting down with you guys, like, is there a first cost to come in and sit down with you?
Spike, there's no first cost. So we offer 2 complimentary sessions with us. We'll call them strategy sessions for the site. So that first one is going to be just time spent to know you. You get to know us. We're going to learn about your goals, your dreams. This is going to be the foundation for our second time that we sit down and going to really get to know, what the plan looks like for their particular situation. So this is the basis in which we're going to start a working relationship if it works out. And we're not going to charge for that. That's kind of personal to us. We want to treat you like family. Our family is here in the business, and we want our family to meet your family.
You know what we find out? Folks come in and sit down with us that first meeting, and they say, you guys are different. And I never heard that accumulation and distribution piece before. You guys are definitely different, and that's why we came and booked an appointment and get that strategy session under our belt.
And hopefully people are getting that message just from watching the show itself. Yep. I love that, saying you're different. But you two aren't different in the office, right? this is who you guys are. You're here to help you energize. You seem to really, really enjoy untangling these knots for folks.
Yeah,
We just have
absolutely.
a servant's heart. We just want to help people, even if they're doing well and they're on track, we're going to tell them that. I mean, it's just a second opinion sometimes. I mean, if the doctor says you need a heart transplant, don't you think you should get another second opinion? And the second doctor says, yes, I agree with the first one, you need a heart transplant. Well, then you're good. Then you understand and you can sleep well at night knowing, hey, I need a heart transplant. Maybe you're not sleeping well at night, but you're more relaxed and understand that, hey, we're on the same page here.
Yeah.
It's an emotional time. It's not uncommon for us to sit down with somebody and some emotions bubble up, and that's great. We know that they're taking it seriously and they're invested, and we're on the right track. That's usually the type of clients that are really meaningful for us.
There's a lady the other day that Joe and I were meeting with, and we're talking about, we moved some money out of one of the bigger companies and over with us, and she started tearing up. And Joe, I saw it, and Joe called, and it's like, are you okay? She said, yeah, it's just, I worked hard for that money. Yeah. And we looked at each other and said, we know, and we really do definitely appreciate your trusting us for that. We handle your finances like we would handle our own mother's or grandmother's finances. Very kid gloves, very, detail oriented, and we don't take that lightly.
Yeah, it's service driven, as you were saying, and your dad has said it a couple of different times on the program. It's that you're doing this in service, and that's very much part of the community and kind of the fabric of the entire firm, is that we are in service. In fact, there is licensing and so forth behind that as well. There's this word fiduciary that goes around. Like you said, though, what I really enjoyed is like, look, if you're doing great, we'll pat you on the back. Keep doing it. Let us know if you have any questions.
Absolutely.
But you'll also identify those harder areas. And again, it can be emotional. Yes, Joe?
Absolutely. So there's two big portions. Obviously, the financials, we want to get that right. But the emotional part, we need to be thinking about where our community, our connections are in retirement, what creative, fun things we're going to be having. This is going to be 20, 30 years of your life, having these other things beyond just are the numbers right is really about long-term success. I mean, you don't want somebody to turn around and go, I'm going to go back to work just because I'm miserable, right? They're retiring for a reason. You should be retiring to something, not necessarily from something.
One thing I've noticed is that when you are talking about money, whether it's when to turn on your Social Security or what investments or what is the right decision, it literally becomes as personal as religion. And sometimes you've got to tell people you're not seeing the full picture.
Right.
Kevin, is that difficult sometimes when you've got to say, that's not the right way to go about this, or is that maybe the best way to go about this?
Well, absolutely. It's definitely difficult because coming from that mindset, as we mentioned, from the accumulation phase, this is what we've always known.
Yeah.
We've always known stocks, bonds, mutual funds, investing in the market, and having these target date funds, and that became our comfort zone, right? And so you get comfortable with getting a paycheck, putting 3%, 6%, whatever into that 401k, and you get comfortable seeing that Social Security check, amount keep rising, and then when you have to make those decisions, and when the rubber meets the road, and you have to make those hard decisions, when do I have to take Social Security? When's the best time? When do I take money out of the market, put in something maybe safe and secure? Do I have to create an income stream, that's going to supplement my Social Security? Yeah. Those are hard decisions, emotional decisions. Moving money that's in your 401k that you've invested, you have 600 grand in there, moving that out there.
The woman who you say in your office, tears in her eyes, that is literally
and she
your
says,
life's work.
I trust you, but it's just really hard. And we understand that. And that's the thing. We understand that. We do this thing every day. We understand. We see those emotions every day. We get emotional because we're helping people to better their retirement.
All right, Joe and Kevin, we'll be right back. You can call the phone number down here on the bottom of the screen and get set up with your own complimentary portfolio review. Let's make sure you've got all of your boxes checked, your I's dotted, your T's crossed when it comes to retirement planning. In fact, one of them, which can be hugely impactful, not just on yourself, but for your next generation, is actually things like beneficiary designation. So let's discuss a little bit about generational wealth in estate planning when we get back after this next segment. But call that phone number right now. You can get started on your own complimentary portfolio review. More Mid-State Money Talk right after this.
Getting into the financial space has been kind of a lifelong calling. I'm second generation in this business. My father started the business in 1979. And so I grew up and throughout my whole life has kind of been in touch with that. For about 20 years, I spent some time in the commercial P&C space. Walked a lot of people through some really difficult times through their life. And I enjoyed the work, but it wasn't a calling, and I always wanted to get back here. And the opportunity presented itself. And you get to the point where waking up energized to do some good work every day is what I was really looking for, and after 20 years in that space, I was ready to move on. And I really enjoy interacting with our clients, and I really enjoy seeing the impact that we make on their lives. And we want them to feel that, you don't ever hesitate to pick up the phone and call your family. And I think that's where we want to be with our clients. We're there to help educate, we're help walk them through their retirement years and their planning process.
Welcome back to Mid-State Money Talk with Kevin and Joe Dietrich of First Choice Financial Services. I'm your host, Spike Spangle. And I did say we want to get to estate planning, but we wanted to make sure, though, a lot of times when couples come in, they might not exactly have the exact same risk tolerance.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been married, hopefully, 30, 40, almost 50 years together, but there's still some things we don't see eye to eye in. How do you get everybody on the same page?
Yeah, that's a good question, Spike. So, we have... We've talked about risk, we talked about investment risk, we talked about these emotional changes, and now all of a sudden we encourage this, bring your spouse, come and sit down and talk through this. And even though one might be the money handler, one not, this is a joint decision, and that's what we see with the risk tolerances. So, for example, Sally and John came in, and they've got $1.7 million. They live over in Harrisburg, and they're doing really great. We've been working for a while, but we start looking at their different investment accounts, and one super aggressive, right? She's super aggressive, and he's super conservative. Yes, yeah, absolutely. And so we say, wow, what do we do now, right? Well, our complete plan is going to be sensitive to both of those risk tolerances, but here's the key, and here's where that emotional aspect comes in. As we're talking and building a plan, they might have different risk tolerances, but they've got shared goals. They've been married for a long time. They can agree upon where we want to go and what we want to do. And so now we're going all in the same direction. We might have some changes here in one account to another to compensate for that, but it's a shared goal, and that's what our plan is to look for. So, that's when somebody comes in.
I've got a lot of questions on them. We might have to dig deeper into them on another program, because I do want to talk as well about estate planning. So a couple like this, I mean, the estate planning, Kevin, might seem like it's really simple. One of the spouses likely passes away. It goes to our spouse then, but passing it to the kids, passing it maybe even to the grandkids, next generations, there's a lot of ways you can build generational wealth, but you got to have some protections in place. When people come in, how many folks don't even have a simple will?
Actually, a lot don't have a simple will. It's very easy nowadays to get a will. You just contact a lawyer. A lot of times you can download stuff online, fill it out, and just take it to a lawyer. They can make it official.
Some don't even have that.
No, they don't even have that. And so, or if they do have a will, it's like 30 years old. And so the beneficiaries the kids are grown. They have grandkids now. Unfortunately, some kids may have passed on. I mean, things change. Or gone
through divorce even.
Right. Yeah. Or the power of attorney might be their mom who passed away. Okay. So things need to be updated. Be proactive in your retirement.
There's
and so
a lot of practical steps too.
It
doesn't have to be overwhelming.
Right. Yeah. So when you pass away without a will, the formal term for it is called dying intestate. I guess if we're married, we know that most of the assets are going to pass over to our spouse, but sometimes it can be a little tricky. We've got all of those investment accounts. We've got all of this digital online world. We were talking about having some of those hard conversations. This isn't always a fun conversation to have, but shouldn't we at least be doing this between the spouses?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we can't assume. You know what assuming means. We can't assume to do things. We can't assume that our spouse is going to get everything we have as a husband or a father. So we have to plan for that.
Right.
And name those beneficiaries. We found that a lot of times there's not even any beneficiaries named on their 401k. So we go into their 401k and maybe look at tweaking a little bit and making some education, some guidance there.
Yeah.
And there's no beneficiaries listed on there. So, and they don't even know that. I think they just assume that when they sign up for it, their beneficiaries are listed on their life insurance policy, or that they might have through work or whatever, and it just gets onto that 401k. But we can't assume that. You as a consumer should not assume that your 401k has beneficiaries, or if your will is up to date. We need to make sure that we're proactive on that.
Right. For that next generation, for the kids, and I'm smiling when I say kids, because the grown kids, by the time you pass away today, might be 60, 65 years old themselves, right?
Absolutely.
So sometimes we're talking a little bit about a fun thing you can do in estate planning. It's actually gifting while you're still alive. I mean, of course, we want to make sure the assets are here for yourself and your partner while you're alive, but are you doing things with estate planning? How does it work in your office? Do you guys do that, or do you have an estate planning attorney who helps you?
Well, we partner with an estate planning attorney, but we're looking at that as part of the overall plan. But when we go to execution and the legal advice, we're not attorneys. We want to refer them over to the attorney and really execute that and make sure that it's buttoned up properly.
Okay. So in talking about a complete plan, where is that for you guys in the conversation? Is this maybe something you'll talk about in a second meeting? Does this depend on how old? Does this depend on how much we have in assets? When do you start talking about estate planning?
Yes.
Good.
Yes. So we talk about it right off from day one.
Okay.
And so that's part of our planning, gathering information. Who's your kids, beneficiaries, grandkids? We get to know you personally, and we make sure that you have a will in place, power of attorneys for health care, directive, all those things. Make sure that they're labeled properly, and the beneficiaries you want listed on the will are the ones that are on there. And we just make sure that you have that in place, part of our plan.
Right, and many of the different things. We've got less than a minute. I'll throw it to you, Joe. So we talked about estate planning. We talked about risks. We even talked about emotional changes in retirement. But you say the comprehensive both review and the plan, what you put together, it doesn't just cover those things. What does it cover for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're looking at the income plan. We're looking at your investment plan, your health insurance, Medicare, Social Security decisions. All of these things are important, and they all connect together for a comprehensive retirement plan. And through our process, we'll be able to touch every single one of those.
All right, Joe, Kevin, thank you very much for covering these topics today. You guys don't mind coming back again next week, do you?
Nope, we'll be here.
All right, folks, call the phone number down on the bottom of the screen. Let's get you started on your own comprehensive review. Investments, taxes, Social Security, medical choices, even estate planning. What's on your mind? If you haven't gone into retirement before, if this is your first time, you don't want to go it alone. Call that phone number. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week.